In 1962, Langston was stripped out of South Africa. I went to Amsterdam to attend the Rijksdag days, fairly young. The Royal Academy in English, by the way. He was a judge in a short story competition for Drum Magazine in IC. And it was fascinating to be in Amsterdam at that time because suddenly there was, for me, access to the real thing after reading art books and about great artists in Europe, Vincent van Gogh and the Dutch masters and the Impressionists and all the rest of them. And so I've been interested in space for a very long time, since early childhood. Not only that kind of space, but the spaces that separate people. the spaces that people have to traverse. In this particular work, what inspired this one was the fact that in South Africa, in the rural areas, there's a great deal too. What was interesting at that time for me was when I, for instance, spent a while in a village called Teslastal in the earlier part of my career. There was one group of children who walked about 5 miles to school in the morning and then walked the 5 miles back after school. And so I was thinking of the difficulties involved in gaining an education. And so the title eventually came to me for this particular one. For some, the pathway to education is lined with thorns. This is a lino cut print. It is a reduction lino cut print. What I mean by reduction is I draw on the block, cut very carefully. I have already decided in my mind that this is going to be a 5-color block print, a 5-color print, and so I cut the block and I ink for the first stage, print it, then I cut it further, ink it, different color, print it, and so on, until I've completed the block. I've completed the block, and what will remain over on the block is what has printed the darkest color here. It is actually a very simple process. But I have found with many adult artists that I've spoken to about printmaking, they have the foggiest idea what I'm talking about until I actually show them how it is done. At that time for me was the fact that there were television aerials on so many of the roofs because we did not have television in South Africa yet at that time. So we were far behind. But also what I found fascinating was the light in Holland, which is completely different to the light in South Africa. Here it was a matter of being pale daylight, pale sunlight, mist, coldness, and so on. So I decided to make a lino cut print using this as my subject. So in this case, it is also a lino cut, but here I've used more than just one block. Subsequently, I often use the reduction method, but on occasion I have actually printed from more than one block. So here is an example of this. But I also use the same block minus this lower portion. I've used this block for printing another one, a picture that is not on this exhibition called Sun and Thorns. One block and a separate block, which I've printed twice. Firstly in the grey colour all over, and then I cut the block again, and I printed the darkest colour. And so we have a 3-colour print printed with one block and a separate block. In 1962, I made my first trip out of South Africa. I went to Amsterdam to attend the Rijks Academy, the Royal Academy in English, by the way. Interesting period. Interesting being in a foreign country for the first time. And it was fascinating to be in Amsterdam at that time because suddenly there was, for me, access to the real thing after reading art books and about great artists.
Colleagues, students, and friends of the Unisa Art Gallery. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Unisa Art Gallery for the first opening of the 2026 year, the exhibition For Some, the Pathway to Education Lies Between Thorns, an exhibition showing works by Peter E. Clarke. This exhibition is presented in collaboration with the William Humphreys Art Gallery and brings together important works by the renowned South African artist Peter E. Clarke, from both the William Humphreys Art Collection as well as the Unisa Art Collection. Today's exhibition celebrates the remarkable legacy of Peter Clarke, who was not only a visual artist but was also a writer as well as a poet, whose work profoundly shaped the trajectory of South African art. Born in Simonstown in 1921, Clarke lived through the realities of apartheid, which included forced removals and systematic inequality. Despite these challenges, he developed a powerful visual language that captured the dignity, the resilience, and everyday experiences of ordinary people. His work remains widely recognized, both locally and internationally, for its ability to reflect the complexities of South African social life. The exhibition, For Some, the Pathway to Education Lies Between Thorns, takes its title from one of Clarke's most poignant works, The image depicts children walking a long and difficult journey to school, navigating a landscape filled with thorny vegetation. Through this simple yet powerful visual metaphor, Clarke reminds us that for many children, particularly those in rural communities and the periphery from the CBDs, that the pursuit of education has historically, and sad to say, even presently, requires perseverance, endurance, and sacrifice. Clarke himself spoke about how the work was inspired by witnessing children in rural South Africa walking great distances every day, simply to attend school. Their journey became a symbol of the broader struggles that many communities face in accessing education. The thorns in the landscape therefore represent not only physical obstacles, but also the structural inequalities that have historically shaped educational access in South Africa. This exhibition brings together Clarke's linocuts, woodcuts, paintings, and watercolor drawings, revealing how consistently he returned to themes of education, social justice, space, and mobility throughout his practice. These works invite us to reflect on how art can illuminate the lived realities of people navigating unequal social landscapes. Another striking aspect of Clarke's works is its scale. Many of the works in this exhibition are modest in size. They are intimate and contemplative in nature. Rather than overwhelming the viewer, they encourage us to move closer, to slow down, and to spend time looking carefully. In doing so, Clarke invites a different kind of engagement, one that is reflective and attentive. The small scale becomes a powerful device, drawing the viewer inward and allowing the quiet narratives within the works to unfold gradually. Clarke's mastery of technique is also evident throughout the exhibition. His command of print-making processes, particularly linocut and woodcut, demonstrate an extraordinary sensitivity to line, to texture, to rhythm. Through careful mark-making, Clarke is able to convey movement, emotion, and the atmosphere with remarkable economy. Each incision into the printmaking surface becomes a deliberate gesture, revealing his deep understanding of the expressive potential of the medium. His marks are both precise as well as poetic, forming compositions that are at once structurally disciplined and also deeply evocative. The collaboration between William Humphreys Art Gallery and Unisa Art Gallery is particularly meaningful in this sense. By bringing together works from both collections, this exhibition demonstrates how institutional partnerships can broaden access to important artworks while fostering dialogue between collections, between curators, and audiences across South Africa. Within the context of the University of South Africa, the themes of this exhibition resonate deeply. As an institution dedicated to expanding access to education across the continent, Unisa understands that the path towards knowledge is not always straightforward. Many of our students themselves navigate complex social and economic circumstances in their pursuit for learning. Clarke's work reminds us that education remains a powerful aspiration, one that communities have struggled for across generations. And having the exhibition here shows Unisa's commitment to making education accessible, as well as making our resources accessible. I would like to extend sincere gratitude to our colleagues at the William Humphreys Art Gallery, particularly the curatorial team, for their collaboration and for making these works available to be shared with our audience here in Pretoria. Partnerships such as these strengthen our cultural landscapes and allow important legacies, important conversation, and important dialogue to continue to reach new audiences. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to welcome Mr. Chipape Makato, who's the Chief Curator at William Humphreys Art Gallery, for his presentation on the background of, for some, the pathway to education lies between thorns.
Thank you so much, Chero. Each time I stand before this mic, there's a way that I introduce myself, and I suppose you will allow me to do that. Ke nna Chipape Makato. Ke nna mmirwa wa matlho a matala wa matlho a mašweu a siena ke mmirwa wa letsenela. Solanka pela ba makgamathapo ya kgatla e tloga e tšwela e betola masogana. Motlhabeng go lla tsuši go lla tateledi go lla mothabo ka mphela. Mothabeng ke swara naka ya mafelelo naka ya tateledi di re dilla dinaka ka mphela nna ka bašala morago ka ya tateledi gobane ke nna mošate. Ke lenong la meloro mebela lora nama le a ja. Ke nna motho a bolosa ka mphe batho leso ka ti motho a tia motho wa hwa. Ke nna mmirwa wa go bua sekgosese a rumiwa tsweta la buile ka o rialo ke kgopela o tšhaba baditi. Good afternoon, colleagues, students, artists, friends, and honored guests. It gives me a privilege to stand before you as part of presentation of this solo exhibition that has been traveling for the past 3 years. It's a very significant project in the sense that it was my first curatorial assignment when I was appointed as the new chief curator at the William Humphreys Art Gallery. I would like to also acknowledge my colleagues from the William Humphreys Art Gallery, Ms. Malika Meyer, who is our curatorial assistant, and Mr. Moses Sinyazo, who is our facilities officer. We drove from Kimberley, carrying with ourselves this particular exhibition, and we are happy that we arrived in one piece. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you today at the Unisa Art Gallery for the opening of this traveling exhibition. The Pathway to Education Lies Between Thorns by the remarkable South African artist Peter E. Clarke. He's somebody who always emphasized that when I call his name, it must not be Peter Clarke, it must be Peter E. Clarke. The curious me, when we had that conversation in 2013, I asked him, why not Peter Clarke? Why emphasis on E? And he joked that when you put his name on the internet search box, there appears many Peter Clarkes. So if you include E, then at least now you are talking about him. This exhibition traveled through different spaces and encountered diverse audiences along the way. Each venue, it has opened new conversations and reflections. That is the beauty of the traveling exhibition. For it carries not only artworks, but also stories and ideas that continue to grow as the exhibition moves from one place to another. For us at the William Humphreys Art Gallery, this journey is deeply important. As a national museum, we believe that having a national footprint must be realized in practice, not only prescribed by government statute. Museums should not exist only within their walls. They must reach outward, collaborate with other institutions, and engage audiences across the country. At WAG, we hold simple but powerful belief that art is for everyone. This traveling exhibition stands as a testament to that principle. By moving across institutions and communities, it allows the work and the legacy of Peter E. Clarke to reach new publics, students, artists, scholars, and members of broader community. The title of this exhibition, which is for some, The Pathway to Education Lies Between Thorns, is both poetic and profoundly relevant. It reminds us that the pursuit of education is not always a smooth journey. For many people, particularly in the history of South Africa, the road to knowledge has been filled with obstacles shaped by the inequality, exclusion, and structural barriers. In many ways, this title resonates deeply with Clarke's own life. Peter E. Clarke was, in every sense, what we might call an organic intellectual. Yet, he was denied the privilege of formal tertiary education under the apartheid system. Despite this, he developed into one of the most thoughtful, perceptive artists and artistic voice in South Africa. Through drawing, printmaking, painting, and writing, Clarke carefully observed everyday life. He chronicled the dignity of ordinary people, the rhythms of the community life, and the social realities of South Africa with absolute humility and remarkable clarity. His works reminds us that intellectual life does not exist within universities only. It also exists in lived experiences, in observations, and in the disciplined act of art making. For me personally, Peter E. Clarke, his generosity became very real through handwritten letters he wrote to me, which we included one of them. I had sent him a package that included a review and small print, and he responded with warmth and thoughtful reflection. In that letter, he wrote something that has stayed with me for many years. He said that he believed artists should also take interest in scholarly pursuits, not only in the production of imagery for the market and the gallery, but for their own growth intellectually. Those words were deeply meaningful to me. In many ways, they planted a seed, a reminder that artistic practice and intellectual inquiry belong together. I often reflect on that line, and I must say that it is one of the reasons why today I am pursuing my PhD in this very institution. In that sense, Clarke's words continue to guide my journey as an artist, curator, scholar, and researcher. They remind us that art is not only about making objects, it is also about thinking, questioning, researching, and contributing to a broader community dedicated to conversations about society and culture. It is also important to remember that Clarke's immense contribution to South African art and culture was widely recognized during his lifetime. In 2005, he was awarded the Order of Ikhamanga, in silver by the former President of the Republic of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, who today serves as the Chancellor of this very university. Later, in 2010, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition of a career dedicated to artistic excellence and cultural contribution. These honors affirm what many of us already know, that Peter E. Clarke was not only a remarkable artist, but also a profound observer of society, someone who documented the complexities of South African life with empathy, dignity, and clarity. As we open, for some, the pathway to education lies between thorns, I invite you to reflect on the deeper meaning of that title, which is taken from one of the works that is on display. Because the title itself reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge and creativity often requires resilience. It also reminds us that institutions like museums and universities share a responsibility to make the pathway less difficult for future generations. Thank you so much for being here today, and I invite you to spend time with the exhibition and make time to observe these artworks until they speak back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chipape, for that reflection on the background of the exhibition and also highlighting the importance of mentorship within our sector and within education. I think it's one of the things that we often tend to overlook, its importance and its impact. I would like to introduce Professor Jali, who is the director of the School of Arts in the College of Human Sciences, and he will be presenting the opening address for the day.
Thank you so much, Tsecho. Good afternoon, colleagues. And thank you so much for coming through to what is promising to be a major highlight in terms of our 2026 exhibition calendar. I'm grateful and honored to be doing the opening address of this exhibition. And it is thanks to the William Humphrey Art Gallery Chief Curator, my brother Chepapa Makatu. I'm also appreciative of the Unisa Art Gallery team, as led by our curator, Tsekofatso Sioka, and her team in the gallery. Colleagues, allow me to also acknowledge, in their absence, the Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa, Professor Lenkabula, and the institution's management committee. I also would like to recognize the College of Human Sciences Executive Dean, Professor Ngosi, and the college management team that could not be here because of other demands within the university. The entire college management committee sends their appreciation of this exhibition. I also would like to recognize the chair of the Department of Art and Music, Dr. Musako, and the entire team of academics within the department. We are gathered today to appreciate the work of Peter E. Clarke under the curator's theme that is titled, "For Some, the Pathways to Education Lies Between Thorns." The exhibition, as explained by the theme, showcases a body of work that asks difficult questions about educational attainment, particularly as for what Fanon called the wretched of the earth. More than 60 years ago, Peter E. Clarke was battling with the question of class, distance, convenience, and transport in educational attainment. Yet more than 60 years later, we continue to grapple with the same questions, the same challenges, albeit in a different circumstance and context. In the last 5 years, media or institutions' reports have read, and I quote, 10 million SA learners walk all the way to their educational institution. And this came from the Stats SA report in 2021. I quote again, some Eastern Cape learners walk 20 kilometers to and from school every day. And this came from the Ground Up report in 2022. Again, another one read, Eastern Cape learners long trek to school. This came from the Daily Maverick in 2024. Another one read, Eastern Cape pupils forced to walk long distance to school. And this came from an ENCA report. These headlines speak to a stubborn problem in South Africa. Problem that can only be described as a, for some, problem. Problem that illustrates the horrors of contradictions and the continuities and discontinuities of the colonial problem in the post-colony. Elsewhere, we have argued on these continuities and discontinuities. In fact, we have theorized that the post-colony is entangled in the past and the present, a coloniality of some sorts. It represents gains and losses in the dismantling of colonialism and its associated legacies. I do suspect that the exhibition we are opening today, as currently titled, For Some, the Pathways to Education Lies Between Thorns, is about to outline these continuities and discontinuities as far as how our past is connected to our present circumstances. But perhaps we are getting ahead of ourselves. And perhaps let's put things into perspectives. So maybe let's start with a sort of a good story first. Over the years, I've had the opportunity of either attending Unisa's graduation as part of the procession or one of the colleagues officiating during the university's graduation ceremony. Of course, the graduation ceremony is the single most joyous moment in the university's calendar. It is one occasion where one witnesses not only the joy of graduates, but most importantly, where one observes the quiet pride of parents, guardians, families or friends as they bask in the wonderful moment of achievement by their loved one. The 2025 graduation Unisa, that is the University of the Land, conferred over 40,000 qualifications. It's 40,000 people whose hard work, sweat, and sacrifice got to be acknowledged by the university. Considering the social justice mandate of this university and the 450,000 students who registered for their qualification, the people who graduated are perhaps people who may not have had a chance to attain higher education qualification in their lifetime. Whilst 40,000 graduates may seem like a big number, we also need to take into consideration the South African context when it comes to progress and challenges of attaining education in this country and the associated dynamics. South Africa is not faring well when it comes to the attainment of formal tertiary qualifications. And thus there is increased pressure on the country and the universities to do a better job in increasing the numbers of graduates so that the country can claim its middle income status with a bit more confidence. And so what is the state of affairs at the moment when it comes to our post-school education sector? 3 important reports allow us to make bold claims about the value of formal training and higher education in South Africa. That is the recent Stats SA report, the trends analysis of the attainment of the NDP targets, and the latest post-school education and training monitor. This afternoon, I have taken the liberty of focusing particularly on the latest post-school education and training monitor, and particularly its macro indicators trends analysis. The report indicates that though education levels of the South African population have increased significantly in the past decade, but only 6% of adults have a degree. This regard, South Africa fares very poorly in comparison to other middle-income countries, thereby compromising its international economic competitiveness. When we further analyze the 6%, we begin to have a better picture of other variables in so much as they affect the figures of formal tertiary education and training in South Africa. And so among the adults who have degrees, many more females than males are degree holders, and the statistics are that 52.3% of women have degrees against 47.7%. The Post-School Education and Training Monitor further notes, and I quote, "Predictably, less African people have degrees compared to other races." The figures as highlighted by the Post-School Education and Training Monitor are a cause for concern, ladies and gentlemen. They illustrate the sheer amount of work that lies ahead for our society as a whole. Although the number of doctoral graduates in the population has increased consistently and significantly in the past decade, reaching 59 graduates per million people in 2019, given the trends, we are told that it is unlikely that the National Development Plan target of more than 100 doctoral graduates per million people of the population will be reached by 2030. Yes, universities have done tremendous work, and in most instances with limited resources, but a 6% degree attainment percentage for a middle-income country illustrates something more sinister about education in South Africa. It reveals a cocktail of issues that entrap some people, thus leading to a few opportunities for upward mobilities and escaping poverty. Now back to where we started. The children whose educational opportunities are limited from the start, and the issues of continuities and discontinuities. As far back as 1962, Peter E. Clarke made a systems thinking observation. He theorized about how lack and want could affect one's attainment of primary, secondary, and tertiary education, and this was 60 years ago. Yet, the Stats SA 2020 report still indicates that 10.1 million learners in South Africa still walked to their educational institution. This 10.1 million was a decrease from the 11 million that was reported in 2013. This number does not mean that all learners travel 20 kilometers to school. Some travel a kilometer or 2 or 3, yet even some are heaving under the pressure of giving up on that education. A child in the Cape Flats stands more chances of joining the local gang than finishing their matric. A little girl walking to school in the local neighborhood may be catcalled by the uncle she's known her whole life, or even worse. Yet Peter Clarke teaches us, Peter E. Clarke, teaches us that tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, the exhibition is open. Let us dream of a better tomorrow through education that has endless opportunities. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I believe it's the afternoon now. Height. My name is Sango Filita, and I am working here at the Unisa Art Gallery as an assistant curator. And my job, I always like it because it's very sweet and short, where I get to acknowledge and welcome and give thanks to everyone who has managed to come here to open this exhibition of Peter E. Clarke. Mr. Chipape, I believe that poem, you need to write it in English, because I don't think I'm the only one who was suffering from the language barrier. But we really do appreciate your opening speech, and we really appreciate the fact that you and our curator has managed to make sure that this becomes a success story. To your team, Mr. Moses and Malika, thank you guys for making sure that he is here and he gets to do the job. Thanks to our team, the Unisa Art Gallery, the new interns, Zama, Salome, Sarah, Chifiwa, not forgetting Usis Khomozo, Miss Msiza, and the curator, Ms. Serofatso Siyok. Our department, I saw like few faces, which is a good thing, because this is our first show of the year. And the last, Prof. Charlie, your speech. What I like about art, even if it can be old from 19 or 70s, it always has a space of reflecting to what is currently happening, which is one of the things that I like about Peter Clarke's work, the education. I think Prof has highlighted every issue that we are facing as a country through education, and we need to build a great stand for our future generation, making sure that we don't just buy these artworks for decoration, don't just buy these artworks for value issues and the other things that the collectors do, but we get to bring them to our audience and see what we are collecting, and to be able for them to reflect as well, because them moving around, I noticed that most of his work, they have messages, and one of my best work is that one behind Prof. Miller there. I think the first one on the left. The title is Passing Through. Ladies and gentlemen, let me not take too much time. I think we managed today to be on time. In fact, all the previous exhibition, we've been doing well. I would like to welcome everyone, and also would like to declare the exhibition as officially opened. We do have refreshments in the front section there. You are welcome to move around until the rest of the day. Thank you.
Colleagues, we have come to the end of our program today, and with that, I would like to reiterate the words of Mr. Filita that the exhibition is officially open. There are refreshments outside, and we also have a registration desk where you can register your name and email so that you can get onto our mailing list. Thank you very much.
Pale daylight, pale sunlight, mist, coldness, and so on. So I decided to make a lino cut print using this as my subject. So in this case, it is also a lino cut, but here I've used more than just one block. Subsequently, I often use the reduction method, but on occasion I have actually printed from more than one block. So here is an example of this. But I also use the same block minus this lower portion. I've used this block for printing another one, a picture that is not on this exhibition called Sun and Thorns. One block and a separate block, which I've printed twice. Firstly in the grey colour all over, and then I cut the block again, and I printed the darkest colour. And so we have a 3-colour print printed with one block and a separate block. In 1962, I made my first trip out of South Africa. I went to Amsterdam to attend the Rijksakademie, the Royal Academy in English, by the way. Interesting period. Interesting being in a foreign country for the first time. And it was fascinating to be in Amsterdam at that time because suddenly there was, for me, access to the real thing after reading art books and about great artists in Europe, Vincent van Gogh and the Dutch masters and the Impressionists and all the rest of them. And so I was able to walk down the road to a place like the Rijksmuseum, the Stedelijk Museum, Concertgebouw, etc. And that was wonderful, very stimulating. What was also fascinating, particularly at that time, this was 1962. What was interesting at that time for me was the fact that there were television aerials on so many of the roofs, because we did not have television in South Africa yet at that time. So we were far behind. But also what I found fascinating was the light in Holland, which is completely different to the light in South Africa. Here it was a matter of being pale daylight, pale sunlight, mist, coldness, and so on. So I decided to make a lino cut print using this as my subject. So in this case, it is also a lino cut, but here I've used more than just one block. Subsequently, I often use the reduction method, but on occasion I have actually printed from more than one block. So here is an example of this. But I have also used the same block minus this lower portion. I've used this block for printing another one, a picture that is not on this exhibition called Sun and Thorns. One block and a separate block, which I've printed twice. Firstly in the grey colour all over, and then I cut the block again, and I printed the darkest colour. And so we have a 3-colour print printed with one block and a separate block. In 1962, I made my first trip out of South Africa. I went to Amsterdam to attend the Rijksakademie, the Royal Academy in English, by the way. Interesting period. Interesting being in a foreign country for the first time. And it was fascinating to be in Amsterdam at that time because suddenly there was, for me, access to the real thing after reading art books and about great artists in Europe, Vincent van Gogh and the Dutch masters and the Impressionists and all the rest of them. And so I was able to walk down the road to a place like the Rijksmuseum, the Stedelijk Museum, Concertgebouw, etc. And that was wonderful, very stimulating. What was also fascinating, particularly at that time, this was 1962. What was interesting at that time for me was the fact that there were television aerials on so many of the roofs because we did not have television in South Africa yet at that time. So we were far behind. But also what I found fascinating was the light in Holland, which is completely different to the light in South Africa. Here it was a matter of being pale daylight, pale sunlight, mist, coldness, and so on. So I decided to make a lino cut print using this as my subject. So in this case, it is also a lino cut, but here I've used more than just one block. Subsequently, I often use the reduction method, but on occasion I have actually printed from more than one block. So here is an example of this. But I have also used the same block minus this lower portion. I've used this block for printing another one, a picture that is not on this exhibition called Sun and Thorns. One block and a separate block, which I've printed twice. Firstly in the grey colour all over, and then I cut the block again, and I printed the darkest colour. And so we have a 3-colour print printed with one block and a separate block. In 1962, I made my first trip out of South Africa. I went to Amsterdam to attend the Rijksakademie, the Royal Academy in English, by the way. Interesting period. Interesting being in a foreign country for the first time. And it was fascinating to be in Amsterdam at that time because suddenly there was, for me, access to the real thing after reading art books and about great artists in Europe, Vincent van Gogh and the Dutch masters and the Impressionists and all the rest of them. And so I was able to walk down the road to a place like the Rijksmuseum, the Stedelijk Museum, Concertgebouw, etc. And that was wonderful, very stimulating. What was also fascinating, particularly at that time, this was 1962. What was interesting at that time for me was the fact that there were television aerials on so many of the roofs, because we did not have television in South Africa yet at that time. So we were far behind. But also what I found fascinating was the light in Holland, which was completely different to the light in South Africa. Here it was a matter of being pale daylight, pale sunlight, mist, coldness, and so on. So I decided to make a lino cut print using this as my subject. So in this case, it is also a lino cut, but here I've used more than just one block. Subsequently, I often use the reduction method, but on occasion I have actually printed from more than one block. So here is an example of this. But I have also used the same block minus this lower portion. I've used this block for printing another one, a picture that is not on this exhibition called Sun and Thorns. One block and a separate block, which I've printed twice. Firstly in the grey colour all over, and then I cut the block again, and I printed the darkest colour. And so we have a 3-colour print printed with one block and a separate block. In 1962, I made my first trip out of South Africa. I went to Amsterdam to attend the Rijksakademie, the Royal Academy in English, by the way.